After Dad's $4.8 million estate opened, my blood sugar hit 658. My brother filmed instead of helping. 3 weeks later, labs proved he'd swapped my insulin with saline. I, 28M, am a type 1 diabetic, which basically means my life is a constant math equation involving carbs, insulin units, and a sensor on my arm that beeps when I'm dying. My older brother, 32M, has always been the golden boy who never actually did anything. He spent his 20s drifting through expensive hobbies and spiritual retreats, while I was in the trenches of our father's logistics company, working 60-hour weeks and actually learning how to run a business. My father passed away 4 months ago. He was a tough man who built a $4.8 million estate from nothing. When the will was read, it was like a bomb went off in the lawyer's office. Dad left me the business, the family home, and the bulk of the investments because I was the only one who didn't treat his bank account like a personal ATM. My brother was left with a $200,000 trust fund, but there were heavy restrictions on it. He could only access it for educational or medical purposes approved by the executor. And guess who the executor was? Me. The entitlement started immediately. My brother lost his mind, screaming that I had brainwashed our father in his final days. Things got really tense about 3 weeks ago when we were at Dad's house trying to finalize the inventory of his personal office. I could feel the venom coming off him in waves. "You think you're so much better than me," he said, watching me check my glucose monitor. "Just because Dad fell for your hard-working son act. You're a sick kid with a calculator. You shouldn't be in charge of a dime." I ignored him, but I started feeling weird. My vision got blurry, and a massive headache slammed into me. I checked my monitor. It was 280 and climbing fast. That was strange because I'd had a light lunch and dosed for it. I went to the fridge where I keep my spare insulin vials. I drew a correction dose, injected it, and waited for the numbers to drop. Instead, they skyrocketed. Within an hour, I was at 450. I felt like my blood was turning into literal sludge. I was thirsty beyond belief. My skin felt like it was on fire, and I was starting to get nauseous. I stumbled into the kitchen to grab another vial, thinking maybe the one I just used had expired or gone bad in the heat. I collapsed against the counter, sliding down to the floor. My brother walked in, but he didn't reach for the phone. He didn't ask if I was okay. He pulled out his smartphone and started recording me. "Look at the big CEO. Can't even manage his own body. How are you going to manage 4.8 million when you're passing out on the floor like a junkie?" Call an ambulance," I managed to choke out. My breath smelled like fruit, a classic sign of DKA. I was fading out. "I think the board of executors needs to see this," he said, his voice cold and calculated. "They need to see that you're medically incompetent. This video is going to get me that conservatorship, and then we'll see who's in charge of the money." He filmed me for what felt like forever while I drifted in and out of consciousness. I eventually managed to hit the SOS trigger on my smartwatch before blacking out. I spent 4 days in the ICU. My blood sugar had peaked at 658. The doctors were baffled. They kept asking if I'd skipped my doses, but I told them I'd actually taken extra correction shots. When I got home, I was paranoid. I checked my vials in the fridge. They looked fine, but something felt off. I'm a nerd for details, and I noticed the rubber stoppers on 3 of my new vials had tiny, almost invisible prick marks that shouldn't have been there if they were fresh out of the box. I took those vials to a private lab and paid for a rush analysis. I also went straight to my home security system. I'd installed a small hidden camera in the kitchen months ago because I thought my brother was stealing my expensive bottles of scotch. I pulled the footage from the week leading up to my collapse. I found it. At 3 a.m. on the Tuesday before my attack, the footage shows my brother walking into the kitchen with a kit of syringes and a bottle of saline solution. I watched in absolute horror as he spent 20 minutes carefully withdrawing my life-saving medication with salt water. He was wearing gloves, looking around like a common thief, and actually smiling to himself. He wasn't just trying to make me look incompetent. He was giving me a death sentence. If I hadn't hit that SOS button, I wouldn't have woken up. While I was waiting for the formal lab results, my brother went full villain mode. He filed an emergency petition in probate court to freeze the estate's assets and have me removed as executor. He used the video he took of me dying on the kitchen floor as evidence that my health was a liability to the business. He even had the nerve to send me a text saying, "I'm doing this for your own good, bro. You need to focus on your condition while I handle the heavy lifting of the estate." The lab results came back a few days later. 0% insulin, 100% saline. I didn't confront him, not yet. I let him think he was winning. I let his lawyers schedule a competency and status hearing in probate court. I wanted the audience. I wanted the record to be permanent. The day of the hearing, my brother showed up at a $2,000 suit, probably bought with the last of his savings, looking like the picture of a concerned sibling. He sat at the petitioner's table smirking at me. His lawyer stood up and started this big dramatic speech about how tragic it was that I was too fragile to handle our father's legacy. He played the video of me on the floor. The judge looked concerned. My brother even squeezed out a fake tear. Then it was our turn. My lawyer didn't argue about my health. He just handed a folder to the judge and asked to play a different video. The look on my brother's face when the kitchen security footage started was the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. The courtroom went dead silent. You could see him in high definition, methodically swapping my life-saving medication for salt water. The judge's face went from concern to pure, unadulterated rage. But we weren't done. We submitted the lab reports and then the kill shot, a series of text messages we subpoenaed from his phone. He'd been bragging to his girlfriend about how he was liquidating the competition and how he'd be stepping into the millions by the end of the month. The judge didn't even let my brother's lawyer finish a rebuttal. He looked at the bailiff and said, "Take the petitioner into custody. This is no longer a civil matter. I am referring this to the district attorney for attempted murder and tampering with consumer products." My brother started screaming. "It was a joke. I was just trying to scare him. He's my brother," as he was being led in handcuffs. The legal fallout was a total landslide. Under the Slayer rule, which exists in various forms across the U.S., someone who tries to kill a person they're set to inherit from is legally barred from receiving a single cent. The judge formally stripped him of his trust fund and his status as an heir. He was charged with attempted murder in the second degree and a felony count of tampering with medication. Because he used my disability to try and fraud the court into giving me control of the $4.8 million estate, the feds actually got involved.
Looked into it for wire fraud, too. He's currently serving a 15-year sentence. He tried to call me from prison to ask for family loyalty and a payout to help with his appeal. I blocked the number and used the money that would have been his trust fund to set up a scholarship for diabetic students who want to study business. The house is quiet now, the business is thriving, and my blood sugar is finally stable. It turns out that when you remove the literal poison from your life, everything else starts to heal. If you think my brother's saline solution was a bit too salty for his own good, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more stories about how the golden boy finally lost his shine.